Senator Weiner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, colleagues, I rise to present Assembly Constitutional Amendment 5 on behalf of Assemblymember Lowe. ACA 5 will repeal Proposition 8, which was enacted by the voters in 2008 to ban marriage equality. It will also affirm the fundamental right to marry for all people in the state of California. As you may know, marriage equality in California is currently protected by a federal ruling striking down Proposition 8 and by the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in the Obergefell case. But the language is still in our Constitution. Unfortunately, last year when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, two Supreme Court justices indicated their desire to revisit the Supreme Court's ruling protecting marriage equality. They used and relied on justifications that also could support banning interracial marriages. ACA 5, if approved by California voters, would amend our state constitution to protect the fundamental freedom to marry. We know that if this court was willing to overturn 5 decades of its own precedent guaranteeing the right to reproductive health access, we cannot and we must not take for granted that this court will continue to stand for marriage equality. This bipartisan measure will help ensure that every single Californian has the freedom to marry the person they love, regardless of race, national origin, gender, or sexual orientation. California must always stand for our fundamental civil rights, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Senator Atkins.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in support of ACA 5. You know, last week I had the incredible honor of serving as acting governor of California, and I had the opportunity to sign bills into law for some of our Assembly colleagues. That same California Constitution that gave me the ability to create laws with the stroke of a pen still says I'm not allowed to marry the spouse of my choice. And I think that's wrong. But I believe if given the opportunity, Californians will right that wrong. ACA 5 gives Californians that opportunity. I'm glad that most of you probably don't know what it feels like to have your life, your liberty, and pursuit of happiness put up for a vote. And I'm glad for that, and I hope that you never will. I know that some of you do know what that means. I'm a big believer in building bridges, and I hope that each of you has encountered that as a member of this Senate. The best bridges are built into the bedrock. California's Constitution is the bedrock of our state for almost 175 years now. California's most basic civil rights, including the right to marry the person we love, deserve to be strongly protected in that bedrock. I believe most of this is very personal, individually. Many of you know, and you've met my spouse. We've been together 22 years, married September 6, 2008, when the state allowed us to marry, so that means 15 years coming up, and I'm very excited about that. It's a commitment and something that we've had to work hard at, like many who have a partner. You have to work at it. It's a commitment. It's ongoing work. And I am honored to have the ability to have that ongoing work. Some days more than others. I'm sure my spouse would say the same. I was really honored, and some of you are in the chamber, when we were sworn in the Assembly in 2010. And I was very excited because at that time, I was, along with another colleague, many of you may remember, Rich Gordon, and his spouse, Denny, we were able to be the first LGBTQ members of the Assembly who actually were married, LGBTQ married couples. And we were really proud of that the day that we were sworn in the Assembly. So I just wanted to share that with you. I ask you to respect my right to have this right embedded in our very Constitution, and to create a little more equity and to build a bridge. ACA 5 has had no votes, and it passed the Assembly in a bipartisan way, with 80% of members in support. So be a bridge, vote aye on ACA 5, and let Californians right this wrong. Thank you. I ask for your support.
Thank you. Senator Eggman.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I also rise in support of ACA 5. And I rise as a married person. And I also want to say I rise as a United States military veteran. I met my wife, we were both serving at Fort Meade, Maryland, in the 1979, right? So that's a long time. We have been together 40 years, have shared our life together for 40 years. As many of you know, she has really significant health care issues. And we discovered many things. We have discovered, and people say, well, why can't you just be civil partners? Because marriage is, defined in the Bible by as a man and a woman. Well, we don't live in the Bible. We live in America. We live in California, where we have a separation of church and state. And while I am a church-going person, I never asked my church to marry me, but I did ask my government to respect my relationship. If we were both able to sign a blank check to serve our country, then why shouldn't our country have the same responsibility to make sure that we have every right that every other American has, whether that's taxes, whether that's health care, whether that's the adoption of our child. As people know, during my time in the legislature, we had a serious death in the family, and with that, we became parents. People may also know that we cared for family members as they have died. A lot happens in 40 years, right? We put each other through school. I'm proud I stand before you with a PhD as a kid who barely graduated high school, and I couldn't have done that without the foundation of my life and that marriage. I don't know why anybody wouldn't want me to have those rights. I don't know why anybody who would call me a friend would not want me to have the same exact rights that they do, that is defined for them in the Constitution, that should be in everybody's Constitution, about what is equality, what is justice, what do we all stand up here to do every single day is to try to make things a little bit better for people. In our California Constitution, due to the voters, due to some very ugly things, it says that marriage is only one man and one woman. We know that's been overridden, and we also know the way things go, people are very frightened that they may lose those rights that they have enjoyed now for many, many years. So as you think about casting this vote, I want you to think about me as a friend. I want you to think about me as a caregiver, as a parent, and as a United States military veteran. I ask for you to enshrine my votes, my rights, like I work every day for yours. I ask for your I vote on ACA 5.
Thank you. Senator Dahle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This will be the toughest speech I ever give probably on this floor. And I want you to hear my heart because I hear your hearts. When I came to the legislature, my goal was to build a relationship with every single member, not only just as legislators, but as human beings. And I've done that. I have wonderful relationships and respect, and some of my most awesome relationships are with people who are married to the same sex. The pro tem mentioned my good friend from Menlo Park, Assembly Member Gordon, been to my home. His spouse has been to my home, and I love him and his spouse, and I love the senator from Stockton so much. But today's vote for me is about my faith and where I believe that I'm accountable to what my heart is with my Lord and Savior. It's not about whether I judge you or not. I listened to a message I saved on my phone through one of my campaigns of a person who left me this really horrible message about I was homophobic and I was a bigot and a lot of things that aren't true. And so today I'm not going to be supporting the bill. And I had a really great conversation last night or Thursday afternoon with Assemblymember Lowe, who is another amazing, awesome friend of mine, and I love him. So this has really been difficult for me, but I want you to see my heart. This is not a judgment on you or your freedoms. This is a judgment against me and my own faith of what I believe I need to do to respect what I believe I will be held accountable for. So I hope you can understand that. To all my very close friends, I'm not judging anybody. I judge the heart because that's the most important part to me. So I just wanted to put that out there, and this is hard because I truly, truly love so many of you that have lost your rights. And so I just want to say this is about me. This is not about our relationship. It's not about you. It's about what I think I need to do in my faith. So I thank you for hearing me out, and I appreciate it.
Senator Lair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that I'm not sure I could do much better than the senator from Stockton and the Senate president, but there is an additional thing here, which is that this amendment represents a progression that is a really long progression. And a lot of times what we do in the legislature is to catch up with where the people are. And that's what this amendment is. When I ran for the legislature unsuccessfully in 1993, I would have been the first LGBT legislator, and there was a campaign. It was very interesting, even from a very progressive Democrat who for the first time in his political history started being photographed with his family and all the things. It was very not subtle. And so we did a poll, and it was sort of, the pollster said, if you ask these questions politely, you will not get at what people really think. And the most pejorative thing you can ask right now is, do you support gay marriage? So we had this question near the beginning of the poll that said, do you support gay marriage? And I was as surprised as anyone that by a 2% margin in my assembly district in 1993, people supported gay marriage. And it was something that a lot of the elected officials ran from, that they did not want to do it. And so there was a time not long after that that Vermont in the Supreme Court legalized domestic partnerships, but it had to be ratified by the legislature. And there were many legislators that lost their seats because they voted with what the Supreme Court dictated they do in Vermont. And then fast forward to 2008, and much to my amazement, domestic partners is the conservative position. It is the thing that people would advocate for if they didn't support marriage. And you forget in the day-to-day life how people have come. And I had this experience. My spouse, apparently we were married 7 days after the pro tem in that window, and we will celebrate 28 years in November, and it is exactly as what was said. It is ups and downs. Right now it's a little bit of a down because why am I spending so much time doing this stuff and not being there? We had a real animated conversation this morning about it. And so, and many of you have heard the story, we never thought we would get married. We never thought that was for us. And then I'm standing in the back of the assembly floor, and a weeping person hands me the phone, and the state Supreme Court has just ruled for marriage equality. And I'm so touched that I do what I never thought I would do. I get out my phone and I propose. And the response, if any of you know the story, is after a pause, he said, "You're doing this over the phone." And I said, "We've had the right for 5 minutes." And he said, "You're doing this over the phone. Can I let you know?" And the deal wasn't sealed until we could be together. And so then he has no idea what a cabinet secretary is. I get appointed. He comes up here one of the weekends in the early months, and I take him on the weekend into the office. And there in the lobby of the resources building is a big picture of the governor and a big picture of me. and he turns to me and says, "You're a big schmo." And he just didn't know. And a few months later, his back went out. He was in excruciating pain. He was locked at home. I had nothing to do. I called an ambulance. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. And as I come in with the emergency room, they said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm married to him." They said, "Oh, okay." And they apologized, and I went in. And then they really sedate him, and he's glassy-eyed, and the doctor and I are standing over him. And finally, he sort of turns his head and goes, "Big schmo." And I said to the doctor, "There's somebody in there. We are good." And I think that what this is about is those day-to-day moments where we are committed to each other, where we are part of each other's life, where in the separation of church and state, that's the separation. And that is the tie that binds through thick and through thin, in the cliche, for richer or for poorer. And so what we are doing with this amendment is we are catching up to where the people are. They have moved way past 2008. They have moved way past Proposition 8. And we are giving them the chance to really at the ballot ratify where they in fact are, and set aside the divisions, and set aside the politics, and set aside whether or not the Supreme Court at the federal level might question this right, have something that's default in place that represents where the people of California are and represents where all of us are in those individual daily moments, celebrating who we are and how close we are and what our relationship is. So I respectfully ask all of you to vote aye on ACA 5.
Thank you. Senator Mann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise as Vice Chair of the API Legislative Caucus and as a proud co-author of this bill, of this amendment, in strong support of this measure. We stand in solidarity, not just on this particular amendment and the right to marriage, but on all rights, because right now we are unfortunately seeing a wave of attacks, sometimes literally physical attacks, a lot of attacks on rights of the LGBT community, and the API community stands in solidarity with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Padilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and colleagues. Reflecting on this important discourse, an overwhelming thought occurs to me, something we all heard in our early days in school, and I hope that we live and remember today. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We hold these truths. They're not evident on their own because we must hold them. We must give them life, not in thought, but in deed and in action. The question before this body to support or not the amendment before us is a civic trust and action. The genius of America and those that fought to give birth to it was that they understood that an assemblage of peoples from many cultures and languages and places on earth to form one nation, e pluribus unum, would by definition have different perspectives, experiences, faiths, beliefs, but must somehow find a way to function civically together as one republic. And the genius of America is that from that, the government, in government's eyes, in our civic places, in our tapestry of laws, there is no religious preference. There is no cultural preference. At the same time, respecting the fact that within the culture, there are many. That's a hard thing for some people to get their minds around. How can you culturally be constructed at any given time in a nation's history of a majority of a certain type of people, ethnicity, religious beliefs, but yet have a government derived from that representative government that is none of those things and all of those things? We hold these truths to be self-evident. It doesn't live on paper or in a history book. It lives on the floor of the Senate today in California. It lives in the hands of the electorate that sent us here. We have to hold it. We have to give it life. We have to remember that America is not, due respect, a Christian nation, an Anglo nation, a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, a Hindu nation. It is none of those things. And yet, in our cultural fabric, it is all of those things. And the government must make room to see them and treat them all the same. Our civic question is whether we are equal before our government while respecting our rights to our private beliefs. That is the essence of the culture war. A confusion and a conflating and a blurring of the line between what at any moment in time in this nation's history may form the majority on anything and what the government's role is in relating to its citizens. We hold these truths to be self-evident, but not unless we hold them. I spent 20 years building a career in local government. I came out in office in the company of a good friend and someone I look up to that we all know. And while I experienced the beauty of love and support and acceptance by many, my entire career was derailed for over a decade that I had to rebuild from scratch. I received death threats. I had people in the lobby of my office as mayor with firearms looking for me. When I had a security detail assigned to me, that in itself became a political football. Morning radio talk show hosts played musical songs and made fun of me, questioning my masculinity, my background in law enforcement, and whether I was truly a man. I was challenged for re-election in large part because I'm gay. And after serving my community where I grew up for 20 years, I was overwhelmingly not re-elected to office and had to set out on a personal journey of reflection, having built, giving myself to the thing I decided long ago I had a passion to give my life to, that suddenly you're not allowed to do it anymore because we don't like who you are. We don't approve of who you are. We can say all we want that this is about faith. Due respect, it is not. It is about whether the government we serve in a pluralistic society with many faiths treats us all equally before the law. Colleagues, please, I urge and I vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Durazo.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I am so grateful to my parents who taught me from birth about how to treat everyone in our world, how to treat everyone with respect. And they did it based on their faith. Their faith was God created us all. We all deserve to be treated right. We all deserve to be treated justly. We all deserve to be treated equally. And that's that. It was a very simple thing. My dad would invite strangers into our little house and say, you know, sit down and have a meal. Our cousin who was gay, we didn't exactly know how to deal with that, but he was gay, but he was there like every other cousin, not to be treated less. And so that played the biggest part in my life to decide for the rest of my life, I am going to fight and do everything I can for everyone to be treated equally with respect and with the dignity of being a human being. So no matter, today, yes, I stand proudly as co-author of ACA 5, but it's also with respect to everyone. And it's about me. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? And I'm so proud to stand for this constitutional amendment, but not because it's a constitutional amendment, because it's about human beings. way past all the things that are created to pit us against each other. And those things don't work in our society. So I say that from enormous gratitude to my parents.
Thank you. Senator Menjivar.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's going to be the hardest statement I have to give, so excuse me if I get emotional. Well, maybe not excuse me. I think you have to see this. I grew up in a very Christian home. I was a teenager that was on the corners talking to people about Jesus and how you would perish if you didn't, come to Jesus. I grew up going to church 3-4 times a week. I was in church all the time. So it was no surprise that when I came out and my family was not accepting of me because of their faith. But I think it's true to some of my colleagues have said that this isn't about faith, because if you're looking at someone's heart, I want to let you know that we probably have the same God, and our God is merciful. Our God will look at your heart too and know that this vote will not impede you from entering heaven, if that's how you're looking at it, because our God is merciful. That same reasoning was given by my mom and my entire family for not attending my wedding. And you can see the damage it still plays today. Even though my family looks at my heart. That was not enough reason to join me in one of my happiest days. I had no idea this was gonna make me feel this way. But this vote goes beyond faith. It goes to the damage it causes to me and my LGBTQ plus families and friends. Because at 34 years old, I am the state senator to the 4th largest economy of the world. I'm a homeowner, I'm married, I have 2 dogs, but yet, the reasoning of faith, the lack of support still impacts me, an individual that I consider myself to be a very strong individual. It still impacts. So, while a lot of our witnesses or testimony are repetitive, I think it's important also to hear these stories, to sit through this if you're not going to go up on this, because you need to hear and you need to see and hear the stories of the individuals you choose not to stand next to. I think that's important, because at the end of the day, if faith is what you're utilizing, Lord is the only person that can judge you. God is the only person, not you, not as a human being. Because I know no one follows every single thing in the Bible to the T. And you cannot pick and choose. With that, I respectfully ask for your support on ACA 5.
Thank you. Senator Smallwood Cuevas.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank my fellow senators for this living lesson that we're learning here today. And I really feel for my colleagues. And I have to ask the question, how long can we allow some folks to have rights in this country and not others? How long do we hide behind the teachings of Jesus Christ to deny our fellow citizens the opportunity to live their fullest and best lives? How long will a lie prevail? I remember the stories about why Black folks couldn't be part of the Christian church. We were the curse of Ham. And that made it acceptable to treat us as 3/5 of a human being, to make us property like this desk that could be treated and done with whatever the ownership society decided, with a whip in one hand and the Bible in the other. I was in the hearing last week where we were talking about the protection of our children as they become their full selves. And you could have, well, you all saw the vitriol, the bigotry, the hate, the violence. And I thought about Ruby Bridges and how the U.S. Marshals had to walk this child into a school. How long, California, how long are we going to have these same arguments? Are we going to stand up and make these hypocritical pronouncements about how our faith allows us to take rights away from another? As the only Black woman in this chamber, the 6th since statehood, along with my good colleague from Gardena, we see the effects every day of what happens when we rob our fellow citizen of their rights. It is evident in this chamber. It's evident in our communities. And most important, it's evident in our soul, how my soul feels right now. We all feel it because we're human beings. And this is counter to a humanity that we profess to support and uplift in this chamber every day, to have this argument that says we will deny Senator Eggman, our pro tem Tony Atkins, Senator Caroline Menjivar, Senator Laird, Senator Weiner, their rights to be fully who they are, where they are, with the people they love. How long? California, enough is enough, and we have the power to stop this here and now and to send a message for the protection of our brothers and sisters from the LGBTQA+ community, to the API caucus, the Black caucus, the Latino caucus, the Women's caucus. California has decided we can do it better and we can do it differently, and most importantly, we can do it right. This is who we are. We're human beings first. And we have to let go of the arguments of the 20th, the 19th, the 18th, the 17th centuries. We got to let it go and move forward into the future. And with that, I respectfully urge you to support ACA 5.
Thank you. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I want to stand in strong solidarity in ACA 5 as the Vice Chair of the Latino Caucus. Latino Caucus now has 38 members. 35 legislators, 3 constitutional officers, our very first LGBTQ chair, our very first Latino LGBTQ constitutional officer, and 4 other members from Stockton, San Diego, and Los Angeles. It is incredible. This caucus, I will say, no disrespect to former caucuses, but is the best caucus because of this. We are forward-thinking, we're modern, and as Latinos from immigrant communities, which many of us, my mom was from Mexico, it's easy for us to default to our Catholicism and say, well, this is, who we are, and our Catholicism reigns supreme, and therefore we won't allow our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and community members to be able to love somebody that they love and get married. But this Latino caucus is saying absolutely not. We're actually trying to encourage even more of our LGBTQ friends to come and join the caucus. And we're asking these questions now of people that are coming in front of us is, how do you stand on these issues? Because we haven't done that before. How do you stand on LGBTQ rights? How do you stand with ACA 5? How do you stand with transgender youth? We haven't done that before, but today is a different day. And we're going to support this in strong solidarity, and we'll continue to do everything we can to continue legislating beyond this. So with that, I respectfully urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Senator Becker.
Thank you. I'm always proud to be part of this body, but I've never been more proud than today and to hear from all our colleagues here today. And my daughter's driving up in about an hour. We're going to drive across the country, and I wear this bracelet in support of her, the P flag bracelet. Equality starts with me. And just just be proud to say I rose on behalf of the Jewish caucus and proud to tell her I voted aye for ACA 5 today. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Ashby.
I want to say thank you to my colleagues, especially Senator Menjivar, because it's really hard to stand on this floor and share your story for what should be a really simple vote. I'm a proud co-author. I'm a lifelong Christian woman, and this is the easiest vote I will take on this floor this year. We all have personal experiences of family that we love, our kids, our nieces and nephews, colleagues. This isn't about faith. And even if it were, is your faith not about love and acceptance and tolerance? Because mine is. This is about whether or not we each get to choose who we love. This is about if we each get to choose who we want to marry, who we want to spend our life with, and whether or not that will be recognized when you walk into a hospital, or when you're in the military, or when you're trying to buy a house together and you need a loan. It is the day-to-day simple thing. And I think Senator Eggman said it so well. I don't understand why anyone wouldn't want her to have that. Why you would think it would be okay for you, but not for her. Again, I don't believe that would be the will of my God.
Thank you. Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also stand here as a proud co-author to ACA 5. Well, I also want to thank my colleagues. It's very difficult to stay composed in the face of these beautiful stories and journeys that are told. As a teacher, I used to always say every day is a teachable moment. So I want to thank my colleagues who shared their deep personal stories, and we've seen them expose their hearts and their vulnerability as they told their story to ensure that this is and continues to be a teachable moment for anyone listening out there. I know it's a difficult subject for many who are older, so I just want to take a moment to recognize some of the conversations that I continue to have with people that are from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and have come a long way in hearing stories, accepting stories, and finally evolving to understand that it's important to recognize that everyone's a human being no matter who they are, and they have that basic right to love and be with whoever they want to be. They're starting to connect the dots, going back to a time where they didn't have rights just because they were women married to men, and men had the right to make decisions for them. They're starting to evolve and start connecting the dots that this is just an issue about humanity, about love and acceptance. And when I hear the stories, as I already mentioned, I can't help but be proud to stand here with all my colleagues, proud to stand here with those that told their stories so eloquently, because even though as in strong support that I am, every time I hear those stories, it just, brings me back and it makes me want to fight harder. So I want to thank all of you who shared your stories. You make me want to fight harder. So I want to say thank you. Thank you, and I hope that we continue to educate. And I have to go back to my classroom when I used to have my students who couldn't tell their parents. It is really outrageous right now that we're making teachers be responsible for these children because they cannot feel safe at home. They cannot tell their parents how they're feeling. And now we want to criminalize teachers for not wanting to out their students. There's so much that's being challenged today. There's so much that's being reversed back. We keep losing rights every single day. So I hope that this body continues to hold the line, continues to push forward, and continue to challenge the entire world and continue to be a leader in some of these issues, because it's important that we stand in solidarity for my students that didn't have protections at home, for my students who couldn't rely on friends, family, grandparents because they didn't understand. And to all my colleagues here, your journey has educated all of us and continues to educate. So thank you, and I urge and I vote thank you.
All debate having ceased, Senator Wiener, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. President, and to all of my colleagues, thank you for those really beautiful and powerful statements. I've been around for a while. I've been around this issue and this fight for a while. I remember very, very vividly in early 2004 when our brand new mayor, Gavin Newsom, had the courage to direct the county clerk to start issuing marriage licenses. I remember the furor that caused. I remember that after the fact, then Mayor Newsom was literally blamed by some national Democrats for the 2004 presidential loss. There were national Democrats that literally would not have their photo taken with Gavin Newsom because they thought he was so politically toxic because he had directed the county clerk to issue marriage licenses to people who were in love with each other. Well, he was proven right, and thank you, Governor Newsom, for your foresight and your leadership. But I remember in 2004, there was literally a line circling San Francisco City Hall multiple times of people who just wanted to get a marriage license. They just wanted to marry the person that they loved. And there was such intense joy that this unleashed, and it was so deeply beautiful. I then remember 2008 in November, the heartbreak. I think so many of us, my heart just sank to know that a majority of California voters had voted to strip people like me and people like our colleagues of this basic right. The sadness in the community to know that we had neighbors who had voted to take away that basic right. I remember in 2013, almost exactly 10 years ago, when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld or allowed to stand the federal court ruling striking down Prop 8. It was I think the Friday before Pride in San Francisco, and I spent half of Pride Sunday as a county supervisor marrying couples in City Hall. And the joy of the couple that I married who met the year that I was born in 1970. The joy of the two young men from Kern County who drove up to San Francisco because they wanted to be married in San Francisco. And when I asked for their identification, because you have to for the marriage license, I realized that they were binational and that because of their ability to marry, they were both going to be able to stay together and not be torn apart. I thought of my aunt, Leah, who came out in the 1960s as a lesbian when it was still classified officially as a mental illness, and who met her partner in 1980, and after 35 years, were able to finally get married. And then I was there, as were we all, about 1 year ago, when we saw the absolute terror that hit married LGBTQ couples wondering, is our marriage going to be invalidated? Is our marriage going to be taken away from us? But fundamentally, this is about joy. It is about joy. And what we are doing today is joyous. And what the voters, I believe, will do next year is joyous. This is about recognizing the fundamental humanity of all 40 million Californians, not just some, but all. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you for this honest debate. Secretary, please call the roll on file item 215.
Allen. Aye. Alvarado Gil. Aye. Archuleta. Aye. Ashby. Aye. Atkins. Aye. Becker. Aye. Blakespear. Aye. Bradford. Aye. Caballero. Aye. Cortese. Aye. Dahle. Dodd. Dorazo. Aye. Eggman. Aye. Glazer. Aye. Gonzalez. Aye. Grove. Hurtado. Aye. Jones. Laird. Aye. Limon. Aye. McGuire. Aye. Minjavar. Aye. Min. Aye. Newman. Aye. Wynn. Neela. Ochoa. Padilla. Aye. Portantino. Roth. Aye. Rubio. Aye. Searto. Skinner. Aye. Small Cuevas. Aye. Stern. Aye. Umberg. Aye. Wahab. Aye. Wiener. Aye. Wilk. Aye.
Secretary, please call the absent members.
Dahle. Dodd. Grove. Jones. Wynn. Nilo. Ochoa. Portantino. Searto.
Ayes 31, noes 0. The measure passes.